Hi, welcome to my podcast, Becoming a Cut Flower Grower. I'm your host, Lydia, and I'm here to share my year of growing and selling cut flowers. I'll be giving you the lowdown on everything I'm doing and sharing all the highs and lows, the good times and the inevitable disasters, all in real time. Join me on my cut flower journey, starting right now. Hello, welcome to the latest episode. It is Tuesday, the 2nd of December. We are in December already. Unbelievable. And it's raining at the moment, so pretty miserable as well. But I have got a jam-packed episode for you tonight, a little bit controversial, which I'll tell you about in a minute. First things first, I finally got to that age where I actually need special glasses to drive at night. Now, I've been struggling with the glare. And if you're in the UK at the moment, there's this whole thing about how bright everybody's headlights are. Some of them aren't even legal. And lots of people are driving around in SUVs and they're really high. And those of us in tiny little low to the ground cars are just completely bedazzled. So I have splashed out on a wildly expensive £8 pair of yellow anti-glare night driving glasses, and I've got to say they are amazing. I highly recommend them to you. If you're having problems with your driving at night or you're just losing your confidence a little bit, then these guys are amazing, and I got mine in a petrol station. So I've just finished module 3 of my Jenny Marks course, and it has been very interesting actually. There were a couple of lessons. This one was all about operations and efficiencies. And there were a couple of lessons in there about hiring and onboarding people, which I thought this is totally irrelevant for me. And at first, I didn't even do the lessons because I thought there's absolutely no chance that I'm going to be hiring or onboarding anybody. And then I thought, no, I really should go and do them because it's part of the course. And I'm very glad I did, because I didn't think it would be anything that I would ever need to consider, because I'm, at the end of year 1 and very small scale, but it was eye-opening, and I'm actually looking into it as a serious proposition. I did actually hire somebody this year, to babysit all my seedlings when I went off on that wild trip to Cornwall, where we had a heat wave at home and a drought. And then I went to Cornwall and it rained every day for a whole week. So I have actually already hired somebody, but having thought about how Jenny Marks does it, there's definitely a lot of room for improvement. So that's that. Now, the main bulk of tonight's episode is my thoughts on a podcast that I have been listening to today. Now, I've been through most of my podcasts. I'm up to date with practically everything. And I was scouting around for a new one. And I found a great one today called The Diary of a Florist with Joanne Truby. And she was interviewing a lady called Lindsay from the White Horse Flower Company. And this is an episode from July of this year, 2025. And they were talking in this episode about using imports versus British flowers, and the kind of the pressure that they're feeling about that, and why they actually use the imports. Now, I'm a huge fan of Lindsay's. Lindsay used to do a podcast and it was absolutely brilliant. And I really wish she would bring it back because it was awesome. And I've listened to every single episode, I think more than once. And one of the things I particularly liked about it, apart from the fact that Lindsay's an expert florist and she really knows her stuff and she talks very freely, she has lots of very useful things to say. But she used to do her podcast while she was walking her dog in the morning over the hills. And she was the first ever podcast I listened to where somebody was actually outside doing a recording. Because when you learn about being a podcaster, they say to you, you've got to sit in a little tiny soundproof room with all these soft furnishings. You can't have any external noise. You've got to have a really amazing microphone and everything's got to be really professional. And when you're first starting out, you've got zero budget. That's just really hard to achieve. Like most of us don't have soundproof rooms. But Lindsay used to do her podcast while she was out walking the dog. And I thought, this is amazing. If Lindsay can do her podcast while she's out and about, I can do mine while I'm out and about. Now, obviously, the flip side for me is that my audio quality has not been as good as Lindsay's, which is why you haven't heard me recording from the plot for ages, because the quality is really not good when I'm up there. And even though that's me using a microphone, not a professional one I got from the internet, but nevertheless, the microphone still picks up loads of background noise, and I'm by the side of a dual carriageway. So it's just not been brilliant. Anyway, huge fan of Lindsay's. So the whole conversation was about the pressure they feel to only buy British flowers and how they're feeling about sort of almost like a shame of using imports and feeling like they have to sort of justify using them. And I thought this is a really interesting topic, and I got very excised while I was listening to it. Now, I have subsequently listened to quite a few more of Joanne, the host's podcasts. So I understand now how much she uses local British growers and she loves using them. So I completely get that. But this is like my first introduction to listening to this lady talking to Lindsay. And I must say, about halfway through, I nearly had a stroke because I was just so wound up with the whole thing. And I thought, I'm going to talk to you about it tonight. And I would love to hear what you think. Now, these two ladies are both wedding and event florists, and they do events all year round. So, one of their main justifications for requiring imports is that clearly the British market is not going to be able to serve them for 12 months of the year. And I don't think there's any argument about that. I think back in the olden days, when we had lots of glass houses in this country and electricity didn't cost £1 million a day, there was probably the potential to grow a lot more flowers all year round and have a lot more available. But that is simply not the case now. Lots of growers don't even have polytunnels, high tunnels, low tunnels, any kind of protection whatsoever. I know that I certainly don't have any. And part of that was a cost thing. And well, actually, most of it is a cost thing, actually. And also because I'm on a slope. So I think erecting structures like that would just, my brain would freeze. But it's also about growing seasonal British flowers. So you get the best of what's ready when it's ready. And we're not trying to force things to do things outside of their normal growing period, because there's always a cost associated with that, either a labor cost or an electricity cost, water, whatever. So lots of us don't do that. Listen, here's me talking about the entire industry, so I represent you. Let me make that clear. I don't. So that was one of the big reasons. But Joanne gave a couple of big reasons for why she uses imports. And this is the key thing. I think us growers really need to be aware of these issues and what florists really feel about this, and have solutions if we want florists to buy from us. So the first one was quantities. Joanne was saying that local growers just don't have the volume of stems that she requires. Now, there are lots of growers setting up all across the UK. And I think once you start, you eventually just find all the local people in your local area. But there aren't any really, really big ones, not even around me. And I'm in quite a busy area. Now, I know of a few larger ones in this country, and I mean like acres and acres, nothing like you would get in the States, and really not in any massive, massive volume. And that's very interesting that the florists are saying they cannot get the quantities of product that they require. That clearly is then going to drive them towards the imports. Now, the second issue was logistics and time. So, Joanne and Lindsay are saying, they don't have time to drive here for an hour or go there for an hour or go somewhere else for half an hour. And the risks of turning up somewhere and the buckets that have been cut for you, or for them rather, are not exactly right for them. Or the colours have come up a little bit different, or the stems are too wavy, or the volumes just weren't there when the grower was cutting. Now, that whole living on a knife edge, I did that a little bit this summer, when you say to a florist 2 weeks out, yes, I'm going to have this. And when you're new, that is really hard to predict when something is actually going to be ready, because there are so many things that could happen in that 2 week period, not least weather or an invasion of pests, or the temperature spikes and the plant starts to run, to bolt, or that the petals get discolored. But anyway, there's just masses of things that can go wrong. So it's hard enough to say 2 weeks out. And then as you get closer and closer to the time that the florist is coming, you've got to be doubly sure that you're actually going to have the stem count that you want, and that they are going to be pretty much exactly what the florist is expecting to have. And if not, you obviously need to give them a couple of days notice so they can make alternative arrangements. But the last thing us growers want is to have florists thinking, well, there's no point me ordering from British growers because I just don't have time to go there, don't have time to go there. And that is an issue. A third one was color palettes. So Joanne was saying she can't always match the brief that she's agreed with the client with British grown. And again, there are all these variables. If the weather's very hot, then the petals fade or they go over too quickly or they just get burnt. There are all sorts of things that can go wrong. I know that I've grown things which I think are going to be a particular color, and they're completely different when they actually flower. And that's like out of our hands. Like, it's best endeavors, isn't it? You buy something that you believe is going to do what you believe it's going to do. And then it turns out it does something completely different, or the weather affects it in some way. So that is very, very difficult. And, the British grown ones, they're real live. I mean, sometimes I think the imports aren't even real. Sometimes they're so stiff and rigid and perfect. It's like they're just not real. I mean, sometimes I think, well, you may as well just buy silk flowers, because live flowers, British live seasonal ones, are constantly changing, and that, I think, is the beauty of them. Well, you know me, I'm biased because it's what I do. Lindsay had an issue about some British roses not being good enough quality, some of them being damaged by the heat, or the blooms actually blow. And she also said she thinks some British roses, the garden roses, are too expensive. And that is a tricky one for us to handle about pricing. Um, I mean, it's very difficult because the florists have to deal with a budget, obviously, that they're given from the client. The client hasn't, not necessarily, I think most of them don't have a clue what flowers actually cost, particularly if you're getting married for the first time and you've never done more than buy supermarket flowers, or even bought a bouquet from a shop for a friend's birthday or a relative's birthday. There's no way you're going to have any idea of what it costs to kit out your entire wedding with flowers. So the brides, or whoever's having these events, is coming to the florist with not a clue how much things actually cost. And I think the florists, unless they are really in touch with growers, they don't necessarily have a clue how much it costs to actually produce those stems in Britain in 2025, with all the costs of absolutely everything having gone through the roof post Brexit, post COVID, post all this inflation and recessions and all of this ridiculous stuff. Like, it's really horrifying how much things actually cost here right now. And so there's this kind of gap in knowledge and understanding between the growers and the florists, and then between the florists and the clients. And, you know, yes, things are going to be cheaper. The Dutch imports are going to be cheaper. They are grown on an absolutely enormous scale. The entire industry has been subsidized by the government over there, the likes of which we don't get those kind of benefits in this country. And so we just can't compete. So if you're going to go just on cost alone, or you want to have a great deal or something, then I don't see how British growers are going to be able to match the prices that you want, because your client, who knows nothing about the cost of flowers, is saying to you, well, this is all that I have got to spend and I want absolutely everything. So there's a big gap there, a really big knowledge gap. Now, Lindsay thinks that British grown flowers are still excellent for sort of wispy bits and certain special stems. And she likes to use both because she thinks they complement the imports complement the British grown. But I rather feel that this leaves us British growers as being a bit of a cherry on the cake rather than actually being the cake. I don't want to be growing just buckets of wispy bits and buckets of a couple of things that somebody's going to use as an add on to the bulk order, because I would like to have a shot at the bulk order. I will go bust if I just sell buckets of wispy bits. I mean, that's just daft. I have to be selling the main bulk of an order. Now, let's calm myself down here. I'm not going to be in a position to do that for a number of years because I'm too small and I'm new. But you get the gist of what you're saying. It's like if you go to a restaurant and I'm just literally going to offer um, a canapé at the start, and all the money goes on the rest of the meal. Like, I would go bust, right? I have to be able to have a shot at supplying the entire meal, not just the canapé or the amuse-bouche halfway through, because that's not a business. Now, I have talked about, um, I've talked about the gap in the knowledge between us and the florists and between us and the clients, but I do feel that I don't understand why, and of course I don't because I'm not a florist, but I don't understand why florists can't nudge some of their clients uh, to not go for every single whim or crazy TikTok trend or whatever stuff they've got off Pinterest that has been plucked from somewhere on the internet. I just, I don't know why the florists can't push them more towards seasonal and British, but maybe, I mean, I guess at the end of the day, whatever your client wants is what you are going to give them. But I do wonder if there's a degree of leeway between weaning clients who know nothing about flowers off really crazy shit like pink roses in February or something daft. I mean, don't even get me started on Valentine's Day. Because I know that if I have clients that I work with, sometimes they do just ask for ridiculous things. And you just have to be really polite and really firm and just say, no, like you can't have that. And I actually had to leave one job because I said exactly that to the client and he blew his top. And I was like, you know what? This is just not the right job for me. I'm just going to leave. You can find someone else who will offer you the world and not be able to deliver it because it's not realistic. In the case of what I was asked to do, it was a product that doesn't actually even exist in the world. So I wasn't being difficult. It doesn't exist because it's a terrible idea and nobody would make it. So there are always clients. I don't, 99% of my clients are sensible enough. If they say, oh, can we have this? I say, no, you can't because it won't grow here. It'll just die. You can't have it. And I don't understand why that same logic can't go towards the florists. But as I say, I'm not a florist, so I'll have to ask one why that's not the case. I do also think that, well, gosh, this is going to sound really critical. You know what? I mean, I had enough trouble getting florists to my field this year to work with me. So this will probably be the nail in the coffin, but I'm just going to say it because I'm kind of thinking that most of my audience, i.e., you, are growers, people who want to be growers. So I'm just going to say it. I think that some florists are completely disassociated from the product that they are selling. I don't think they know enough. I think they're very used to ordering online. They don't even have to go to the flower markets anymore. They don't know what is seasonal. They don't know what can be grown in this country and when it's ready. Now, not all of them. There are some who absolutely know their stuff, and that is wonderful. But there are others who are just clicking buttons and stuff just arrives and they have no idea how much it even costs to produce those stems. Absolutely no idea whatsoever. Now, the other issue that the ladies talked about was not wanting to be undercut on pricing by new florists. This is a very tricky one because us growers don't want to be undercut or have our prices knocked down by florists either. So the pricing thing is very sensitive. Um, Now, what else? Yeah, one of the other things that got raised, Lindsay talked about this, about an influx of new British flower growers and how, they started off selling at market stalls or stands and then they started producing a lot more flowers and then they're sort of turning into these grower florists, if you like. It's quite a new thing. She thinks it's diluted the florist pool and that the growers are not experienced, not skilled, not trained. But I think there is a place in the market for grower florists who know the flowers so well. I think they've got such an advantage on straight florists because they know their product and they know when it's going to be ready and how it's going to work and how it's going to perform. And I think they are perfectly capable of delivering a wedding, an event with flowers that they have grown and still supply clients who want a high end product. I don't see that florists have to be like, oh, well, we're only going to look after the clients that want the best and know what they want and all the rest of it, because I think flower growers could also do that. And I also think that certain florists, if they're going to have really expensive premises, if they're going to have shops on the high street or even on secondary streets just off the high street, and they're going to kit out their shop and they're going to do all their fancy websites and all their branding and have a lovely car, they are enormous overheads that have to be sustained. And those overheads have to be passed on to the clients, which is why when you go into a florist shop on the high street, the prices are absolutely terrifying. And it's why I mean, I know what the margins are for selling to a wholesaler, selling to a florist, selling for weddings. There's a very big gap in the margin between a wholesale price and a wedding price. Now, that's to accommodate a whole load of other factors. But it doesn't get away from the fact that if you load your business up with absolutely thousands and thousands of pounds of overheads, you're going to have to pass that on to the customer. And I don't see why the customer should have to pay really high prices for a product just because a florist has got enormous overheads. So there you are. I've said it. I'll probably get shot by a florist now. I think the final, well, not the final, the semi final point I want to make is that even the smallest amount of research into the downsides of imported flowers, and I'm particularly talking about roses, that most of them come in from Kenya. Kenya actually supplies 40% of European cut flower market. You only have to do the tiniest, simplest search on Google to find all the downsides of imported roses. And believe me, there are a lot. I mean, that we know that the flowers are heavily sprayed. We know that this quite a lot of the industry is unregulated and it's very tightly controlled. These are not farms that you could go and walk around. You're not allowed to go in most of them. They draw a lot of water from the local community and they pump out wastewater, which is jam packed full of fertilizers and other chemicals and pollutants into the local water sources, which pollute them. You get horrible sort of dead lakes or lakes that are totally covered in algae. The workers don't have proper PPE either. And in Kenya, 75% of the workers on these rose farms are women. Now, I don't know about you, but I wouldn't want to be working in a place where chemicals and sprays are being used without adequate PPE, because there's a whole raft of health and hormonal and pregnancy issues. There's just a whole load of stuff that you just would not, I would not be comfortable doing that. And I think there are some very serious health and environmental issues with some of these rose imports. And I don't understand how anybody can justify supporting an industry on the grounds that, oh, well, it's employing local women and therefore it's good, if those women are working in terrible conditions, putting their health at risk, never mind the environment, which is like a huge issue. Now, you might say, oh, there are no other sources of income, but what a terrible choice that those women have to face. These are women just like you and me, that they're no different from you and I. And also that people in this country can have these plastic looking picture perfect roses. It's horrible. It's a horrible, horrible thing. So I'm going to try and end on a positive note. What can we do as growers if we want to sell to florists? Now, not everybody does. Lots of people just take their flowers to market, or they do their own subscription service, or they have farm stands, and they don't ever go near the wholesale market with florists. But I have done it for year one. I was going to do it for year two onwards, assuming nobody blackballs me for this episode. You just never know. We have to have a better dialogue with florists. We have to know what they want, when and why. We have to understand their colour palettes and what we can grow for them and in what volumes. And ideally have enough volume to keep them satisfied in enough palettes or enough combinations of palettes that they're going to be able to work with, and I guess have substitutes if they're not happy with our initial offering. but we really, really have to know what they want. And if it's not something that we think we can do, because they might be coming at us saying, oh, we want to have this tropical plant in December, have you got it? We have to be able to show them that we've got something else on the table. Now, admittedly, between November and March, that's going to be extremely difficult. So I cannot say anything about florists needing to order imports during the winter in Britain, because I know I'm not supplying anything. I know lots of people are not supplying anything, but there's a very good reason for that. Because if we did, our stem prices would be something insane, like £10 a stem, and the florists wouldn't buy them anyway. So we really can't win. Quantities, we have to be able to offer, the volumes that they want. Now, this is a tricky one, because if you're growing on a small bit of land like me, I've got about, I don't know, eighth of an acre under cultivation. I could do 500 cosmos one week, but I couldn't do 500 stems of roses the next week, because there just isn't enough space on the plot. So there has to be an understanding, I guess, that the florist can come to you for some volumes of something, but you're not going to be able to do every single volume of everything that they want. Unless, of course, you've got masses of space, which would be awful. Which would be fantastic, rather. Quality. So ours have to be the very best. I think that goes without saying, to be honest. I know that I don't let anything go out that I'm not happy about. Some things that I have let go that I thought were a little bit iffy, I've been assured that they were absolutely fine. And I should just look at the big picture and not the individual like petals, because I did get a bit obsessive about that this summer. Logistics and time. So can we offer an easier option for florists? Can we deliver? Can we courier the order over? How can we reduce the amount of time that they spend traveling to us in order to collect? What's the alternative? What does it look like? Now, in my town, there are moped drivers absolutely everywhere. This is a new thing now since COVID. Everybody has everything delivered, mostly food, I think. So these guys, they sit on their mopeds outside the restaurants, just waiting, constantly, just waiting to deliver orders. I'm going to go over next week and have a word with one of them and see how much he would charge to ferry flowers around. He may have to put the bucket between his legs on the front bit of the moped, but it's worth asking. There are always people ready to fill the gaps that exist. And the gap with COVID is that people wanted to have everything at home. The restaurants wanted to keep selling. So moped drivers just pop in and they fill that gap. And I'm wondering if there's some kind of equivalent that can sit between the growers and the florists, although in some areas, and I have one, there's a hub. But I mean, the florists still have to drive to the hub. I still have to drive to the hub to drop the flowers off. Cost of production. Now, I don't know whether florists will care about this, but I do wonder whether it's something that we should be sharing with them so that they understand why we charge what we charge. Because I don't know that we ever tell them what's involved. I don't know that I have ever sat down with my florist this year and said, well, look, it costs this much, the stem, because it's cost me this much to produce it. And it's cost me this much, like to buy the plant, and then all my time to plant it and mulch it and weed it and prune it and take care of it, and all of the tasks that you do all throughout the year, plus all the overheads that you have every single day anyway. I mean, I don't know whether florists would be interested in that, but I feel like it's maybe a bit of the process that would help them to understand the value behind the product, so that when they're trying to explain it to their clients and the clients say, oh, I can't afford that, but they can say, well, look, this is a product that's been lovingly tended for X number of hours. It's had this and it's had this and it's had this, and you will get nothing like it. And none of your friends will ever have anything like it. Because all these people getting married, they think they're having something really individual. Well, they're not. They're getting a whole load of stuff shipped over, mostly from Kenya, that's all the same, that everybody's having the same. These things are identical. They're like robots. There's no identical flowers when you grow your own in a field. I can guarantee you that. So at the end of the day, and this might sound a bit dramatic, this might be the final death knell for me ever being able to sell to a florist. If the florists don't want to buy from us, we need to look at selling directly to clients ourselves. And we would have to go and find the brides, the event planners, the party planners who do care about how flowers are grown and transported. Not just rich people, because they can always afford everything, but actual normal human beings like you and I who aren't comfortable with flowers that cause health problems for other women, flowers that have flown more air miles than some of us will ever do in an entire year. It's madness. Um, and who want a very unique and very special product, because I think our flowers that we make wherever you are in the world are so unique. They are a product of how we raise them, how we make them. And I know for me, like blood, sweat, and tears goes into them. And I think that should be available to everybody, not just very rich people. But we do have to be honest about how much things cost to produce in this country, with land prices being what they are and everything else costing an absolute arm and a leg. So that's what I think about all of that. And hopefully nobody will throw a brick through my window after that. Have a lovely rest of the week. I will be back on Friday unless something bad happens to me and a florist gets me. And I very much hope you'll come back and join me then. All the very best for a great rest of the week.